Hey, this is Dawn Jones with the City of Stillwater. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. Today's subject, street projects and infrastructure. Thank you for joining us. My co-host is Melissa Reams, Deputy City Manager, and our guest today is Monty Karns, Director of City Engineering. Welcome, Monty.
Good to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about a subject that, no one really talks about it, right? No one talks about streets, roadways, none of that. No, never. None of our community, huh?
You must run in a different crowd than I'm running.
That is the hot topic, and necessarily so. Tell us a little bit about some of our state roadway projects and our city roadway projects and these great collaborations to address the issues that our residents have shared with us for so long.
Well, of course, probably the biggest project that most people know about right now is Perkins Road. The project actually will go from 6 all the way to Airport, but most of that gets milled and overlaid and gets a new topping. But the reconstruction is basically from Hall of Fame to just north of Lakeview. That's a partnership with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. Our role and responsibility in that project was to pay for the design, secure the design, and then pay for any utility relocations that were required to be, any utilities were required to be compensated.
Well, and Monty, let me ask you this real quick. I'm glad that you said that. You really spelled that out well. And that is a joint partnership project with ODOT. So
That's
that is
correct.
A state highway. So they bear the majority of the cost in the construction. But that total project is probably approximately $30 million, correct? With the city at about $7-8 million?
No, I think it's more like 15.
Okay.
And we paid, well, I can't remember the numbers right now. I know we spent about $1 million on right-of-way and about $250,000 relocating other franchise utilities, and then we spent close to $1 million on the engineering when it's all said and done. So, for a couple of $1 million, we got a $15 million project. Not a bad return on them.
So the majority of the expense for highway construction projects is ODOT. They
That's
bear
correct.
the majority of that.
ODOT has responsibility for their highways.
Yeah.
And so, Monty, speak a little bit about the difference between just mill and overlay, which I think you kind of
Sure.
referenced, and then what we're actually doing from about McElroy up to Lakeview, which I think is more reconstruction, is it not?
Yeah, that's correct. The mill and overlay refers to an asphalt constructed road. The top surface on an asphalt is what we call the wearing course, and it wears out. Mm-hmm. So you come in and mill that off and then put a new wearing course on. So that's what we mean by mill and overlay. The other section of that road, because of the traffic, 25,000 cars or more a day through there, lots of businesses on each side, so it's being widened to accommodate a left turn lane to make it safer, move more traffic, move it safer. Be also raised islands so that if a pedestrian is trying to cross at a location somewhere, there'll be an island they could get in if they needed that. So those types of things. The original road was built in the late 60s and was basically a 2-lane road with 10-foot shoulders. Mm-hmm. And through the years, those shoulders had an asphalt overlay put on them, but they were never designed for the traffic, particularly the truck traffic that's been going on them for the last several years.
So much of that heavy load and wide and truck traffic.
Sure,
Absolutely.
There are industrial areas at the north end.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
It's a long overdue project, and we're grateful to the Department of Transportation for being able to fund
For
it.
helping us. So one more question about when we reconstruct a road, don't we also look at what's underneath the road?
Oh, yeah.
I know you referenced relocating utilities. I think people usually think about what they can see above ground, the electric lines in particular. But when we're looking at what's underneath, kind of help us understand what's underneath the ground that
Glad
we
you
have
brought
to
that
move.
up. That is so key.
Yeah.
So underneath, of course, we've got our water lines. We have had to relocate at the utilities expense. We've got sanitary sewer lines. Oklahoma Natural Gas has underground lines. Communication companies can have underground and overhead lines. OG&E had some overhead lines but they can have underground. They didn't in this situation, but they had lines that were overground that we had to relocate. Not a lot of them. So those were the major ones. Communication companies. And it's AT&T, Chickasaw, Suddenlink. I think Suddenlink's changed their name again, but
They have.
but those types of utilities.
I just think that, of course, I've learned so much from my association with Monty. He's been so generous to teach this accountant some stuff he learned over in the College of Engineering.
And we've learned an awful lot about accounting as well.
We share with each other, but I think it's so important to get that out there. So the next big ODOT project that I see coming down the pipe at us is the widening of 6th Street. Is that what's next?
That's correct. That'll be the next. It'll be the next major ODOT project. They have some sidewalk projects scheduled for 6th Avenue going east, starting at Perkins and going out to probably
Okay.
Brush Creek Road. That'll be a fairly minor one and a much needed project. But in terms of roadway, the next major one will be 6th Avenue, in the middle of designing that one. Our role in that one is just to purchase right away and relocate utilities. ODOT's actually doing the design work, paying for that. That'll start just west of Western at Devon.
Right.
And then extend to about the mill. They will do that in several phases. They may let 2 phases at a time, but basically they'll come in and do the major intersections first,
Okay.
and then they'll have phases that come in and connect those. So disruption won't be hopefully as severe as it's been on Perkins Road.
Right.
Oh,
right.
that is great to hear, because I know that people have already voiced concerns about once that Highway 51 project gets going, what would that look like? Because as it is, both obviously Perkins and 6th are major roadways in our community.
Well, they are, and 6th Avenue is such a major thing to
Right.
us that when they first brought that to us several years ago, I said, this will set things for 50, 60 years.
That's right.
So give us time to do a study about how we think the community might, our best guess of what we think the community would develop along there over the next 50 years, and then make sure we don't do something that would prohibit that
Right.
with the design. And they thought that was a good idea. So we did what we called the 6th Avenue Corridor Study, where we looked at, okay, what are all the possible different kinds of developments that could occur? I mean, one question is, do you really want residential traffic or residential development next to a major highway with
Right.
people backing out in the streets and that kind of stuff? And especially, I mean, we depend on sales tax.
Yes.
Could that property generate more revenue as retail or commercial? So anyway, we looked at those types of issues, came up with a plan. Part of that big plan was, where do we put the active transportation component and not try and mix that in with so much heavy traffic. And so we came up with a plan of where we can improve streets and crossings to the north and to the south, so folks will be able to ride and walk in a safer environment.
And right there, you just hit the nail on the head. Our community is multimodal.
Absolutely.
And we love that. We
Yeah.
love our walkers, our runners, our bikers, our rollerbladers.
Yeah.
We have all of it. Every
Our
single
scooter
bit of it.
people.
Our scooters. And that's who we are. And it is great that you guys are ensuring that we have additional sidewalks, better sidewalks, greater roadways, pathways. I know that you've just hit on rails to trails, all of these different avenues that you're looking into. And you've shared with us a little bit about highway. Let's talk a little bit about, state projects that we're working with. Let's talk a little bit about some of our street roadways that the city is leading.
So several years ago, the citizens passed a half-cent sales tax, and we use primarily, we call that pavement management. It's an asset that we manage, where we go in, and every 5 years we raid every block of every street. And the crews are actually in town doing that right now. It's a company called IMS. They're driving the streets. You may see them around, and they will give us ratings, and those ratings will help us determine how to allocate our money. So we've learned a long time ago, if you spend a little bit of money on a street that's really, really good, you can spend a little bit of money and keep it in good shape a lot longer. And then the more it deteriorates over time, the more you've got to spend to get it up. And then at some point, it's just not economical. You got to tear it out and rebuild it.
Right.
So we ran an analysis for city council and said if we took $4 million a year that we get on the half-cent sales tax and didn't do and only spent it on the residential and local streets and started with the worst one and rebuilt it to a 30-year standard, never touched the collectors, never touched the arterials, didn't spend any of that $4 million on design or testing or any of that stuff. It'd take us 67 years to rebuild all those streets to a 30-year standard. And so then the citizens responded to that by giving us another half cent.
Right.
So,
And I think this goes back to what you alluded to a little while ago when I asked you about what is mill and overlay. If we have a street that has a good base, a good road base, if we can keep that top coat as it wears down, if we can keep it refreshed, we prolong the life of the structure underneath.
that's correct. And, one of the great things about the 2017 study that IMS did for us, they actually did a process where they structurally tested how good the roads were.
Right.
And the base. And what we learned from that was structurally our streets are in pretty decent shape. They're just rough riding, which isn't news to anybody. But the good news of that was on our concrete streets, we can diamond grind those smooth. And we've started that as one of our techniques. Where before we thought, well, we'd have to put some kind of an overlay on those to get them to smooth out. Well, the diamond grinding is drastically cheaper than doing an overlay. Plus, we don't have to worry about drainage concerns.
Right.
When you come in and put an inch and a half and a 6-inch gutter curb, well, now you can have some drainage issues.
Right.
So it just kind of takes away from those aspects.
Well, and you can
and
see
better use of our dollars.
Absolutely, and you can see a good example, I think, of the diamond grinding methodology out on 32nd, isn't it, between Western and Sanger? Isn't that where you did that?
We did that. We did it there. We did it on Main Street, south of 12th. We did it on. We did on Western from 6th to just north of 3rd. We've opened bids this week on doing McElroy from Maine over to Jardeau.
Cool.
So those are things we've got coming up.
Right. There's one unique thing I want to talk about before we conclude our conversation. And when we were talking about the 6th Avenue project from Devon down to the mill, we were responsible for buying the right-of-way.
That's correct.
And so what our citizens are going to see and our employees are going to see is here in the next, I'm hoping in the next month, we went in and purchased 5 homes that are there from the corner of Western and 6th down to, they're in that block there on the north side. And we have sold 2 of those homes. They're unoccupied, and we've sold them, and they're going to be moved out. Eventually, as we need the right-of-way, we're going to move those other properties as well. This, for me, was the first time I've seen this done, but I think it was a very cost-effective manner in getting right-of-way purchased. Is that what you're seeing, Monty?
Sure. And we're actually we don't like to start purchasing right away until we're a little further along in the process, so we know exactly what right of way we needed. But we were far enough along that we knew we had to have right of way there, and we had to have so much right of way that we would damage those lots beyond people being able to use them.
Right.
So we just decided we need to buy them. there are very strict rules when you're using federal dollars of how you purchase right of way and how you treat not only the owner of the land and the house, but also the occupants. So we followed those rules and made sure. And then the goal is not to have to buy any more structures.
Right.
But we'll see how that goes when we
Yeah,
get a
we
little
will.
further along. The rest of it will just be
And I love
limited right away.
I love the repurpose of the homes.
Right. And
Yeah.
Dawn, talk a little bit about that, because I want people to know that these homes are going to be moved. And they're
Absolutely, they-
going to be repurposed for a family to live in, because Monty was the one that went over and inspected those homes when we were getting ready to purchase them. And they're good homes, aren't they, Monty? They're
Pretty good shape.
strongly built.
Solid
good shape.
foundational
Yeah,
homes.
yeah.
So those will be moved, and I don't know that we've established a date when those are going to be moved yet. I know that those plans are being discussed recently. I was overhearing those conversations, so I know that that's going to happen. But I think that that's just an additional example of what we do here, where we do every possible effort to not waste, to be mindful of taxpayer dollars, and to repurpose every possible resource for the benefit of our residents and patrons.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it warms my heart to think that there will be new families
love
living in
it.
those homes.
I love
Yeah.
it. So, can we just talk just real briefly in gratefulness, thankfulness? We understand the frustrations that everyone has with the construction. We thank you for your additional patience and allowing more time in your travel, maybe finding another route. But can we also give a big shout out, thank you to our businesses?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
they have went through all of this with us, especially with Perkins, and this will occur inevitably with Sixth. But it is really when you start getting in there and digging and seeing that the different levels from the old to the new of what has to be built up, it can definitely prevent direct access into the business. There will always be an access pathway to the business, but it may not be directly into their parking lot, which can be inconvenience, a huge inconvenience. But thank you guys for continuing to shop local and invest in our businesses. And thank you to the businesses for having patience with us through all of this.
And I would echo that. I would say as well, something I learned from a recruitment trip way back when I was graduating from college, had an opportunity to go to work for a defense contractor, chose not to. But when I took that tour, every one of the groups we went through had some kind of sign about project deadline and had some kind of sign about motivation, different things. But the one that stuck with me the most had the test deadline, and next to it, it had a sign that said, "The bitterness of poor quality long outlives the joy of on-time delivery." And so sometimes we understand the pain, we understand the inconvenience, but we also understand that we want to make sure that we're not back in there again, and
That's right.
we want to make sure that. And if you've driven the northbound lanes on Perkins Road, contractor Dewitt has done an outstanding job on those,
Yeah.
and the project's looking good, and they're doing a great job, and so
and
we
we're
have no
on-
doubt about the
Are we
quality
on
of that.
time? Are we
Right now they're on
schedule?
time. Yeah,
yeah,
they're
good.
still on the schedule.
Excellent.
Well, we're going to have to wrap this up, but absolutely not before we wish Monty.
I know Monty is a short timer. His colleagues keep calling him that. His last day with us is next Friday, I believe.
That's correct.
And after a career of 50 years in transportation and engineering consulting and working with ODOT, we are going to send Monty off to experience sunrises, sawdust, and golf. And he and his wife Debbie are going to go live their best life at the end of his career.
I'm not sure how many sunrises we intend to see, but we intend to see a lot of sunsets.
There we go.
There you go.
Did
Thank
I
you
say
for your-
sunrises? I hope you sleep in.
Well,
Hey.
I think we made that comment this week that there's only one more week of alarm clocks.
There you go. Amen. Amen.
Well, we greatly appreciate your service and everything that you have
It-
done. You
it
have
has-
left your mark here in
Yes,
this city.
absolutely.
It has been a great run. Oh, well over half of my career has been spent working here in Stillwater. When I came here in August of 1970, it was my plan to be here 4 years, get my degree and be gone. But there is some satisfaction of knowing that most of your career was spent helping the community that you dearly love.
You definitely are that example of a heart for service.
Yes.
You've left your mark. Just know that these roadways, these multimodal projects, the infrastructure, things that so many of us take for granted, that you've been absolutely an integral part in all of this for us. So thank you again, Monty. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. And don't forget to subscribe. Together, we are investing in municipal excellence.